Chapter 10, War and Pieces. On the day after the big fight, just as Tom had guessed, Ahmed became famous. In the playground, wherever he went, people pointed and gasped and called him the boy who beat Brendan the bully. And they asked him lots of questions like, is it true you can do 100 punches in under a minute? And what were you really fighting over? Was it your parents' ransom money? And when are you going to fight again? Can we come and watch? After a while, Miss Hempsey began to tell everyone to leave Ahmed alone. So everyone started asking Michael and Josie and Tom and me their questions instead. I didn't say much, and neither did Michael, but Josie and Tom got so excited that they started to add new bits to the story, so that by the end of the week, most of the school believed Ahmed hadn't just beaten up Brendan the bully, but he had fought Chris and Liam too, over a suitcase full of red diamonds and a pink basketball. All of this made Brendan the bully scowl more than ever. But even though he stared at us all the time and Chris and Liam showed us their fists whenever they saw us, they didn't chase us around the playground or steal Josie's football or smash into us when we were carrying our lunch trays like we thought they would. I bet he's scared of us now that we've got Ahmed, grinned Tom. Yeah, said Josie, he's proper scaredy cat now. But Michael said he didn't like it one bit and that he bet Brendan the bully was up to something. At first, I didn't believe him, but then lots of strange things began to happen to Ahmed. The first thing happened just 2 days after the big fight. We had all been decorating a new pot for our photosynthesis plants. And Mrs. Khan had given Ahmed a gold star because his plant had grown faster than anyone else's. I think that was because every morning before Mrs. Khan called the register, he would water it and talk to it for 1 whole minute. I didn't know that plants could speak different languages, but when I asked Mrs. Khan about it, she said plants could speak every language under the sun, and that the more languages they heard, the faster they grew. Ahmed was really proud of his golden star, and he got a silver one too for decorating his pot with pictures of seashells and whales and fish. But when we got back from last break that afternoon, his pot was lying broken on the floor and his plant had been stamped on. Someone must have smashed it on purpose because nobody else's plant were hurt at all. Mrs. Khan said that if the person who did it didn't put their hands up right away, they would be in big trouble. But nobody did put their hand up, so the mystery of the murdered plant pot stayed a mystery. Then almost exactly a week after the mystery of the murdered plant pot came the day of the deathly worm tray. After assembly one morning, Mrs. Khan told us all to get our workbooks from our class trays. But when Ahmed pulled his open, he found it bursting with a whole pile of large, fat, wriggling worms. He cried out and dropped the tray on the floor so that all the worms went flying out across the room. That made Dean, who sits on the table behind me, be sick all over his table. Dean is scared of anything that doesn't have any legs on it, even snails, but he hates worms the most. Mr. Whittaker, the school cleaner, had to come and clean it all up, and Mrs. Khan and Miss Hempsey were very angry and checked all our trays. But no one else had a single worm in their tray, not even Tony, the nose picker, who likes to collect all kinds of strange things in his tray. Mrs. Khan told the person who had done it to put their hand up again, and this time she looked at Brendan the bully as if she wasn't really speaking to any of us and only to him. But again, nobody put their hand up. So Mrs. Khan shook her head and said she was going to make sure that whoever it was would be caught soon and punished not just by her, but by Mrs. Sanders too. And then after that came the worst trick of all, the one that everyone in school later called the Great Baked Beans Bag Trap. Every morning, right before Mrs. Khan takes the register, everyone has to put their school bag on their own special hook at the back of the class, and we're only allowed to take our PE kit or homework or lunch boxes out when we're told to. Everyone knows whose bag is where, because everyone's hook has their name on top. Just days after the day of the deathly worm tray, Mrs. Khan told us to get up and collect our PE kits from our bags, just like she always did on Wednesdays. But when Ahmed went to get his PE kit and unzipped his rucksack, a lumpy river of baked beans burst out and splodged and splashed all over him. Everyone cried out, "Ew!" and then instantly fell silent. Mrs. Khan was so angry when no one put their hand up again, and she cancelled PE, and Mrs. Sanders came and told the whole class off. It was horrible, especially because Ahmed started to cry when he saw what had happened to his PE kit and his bag. I think everyone knew it was Brendan the bully who had done all these things, but no one could prove it, not even Mrs. Khan. After that day, the door to the classroom was locked every break time and lunchtime, which stopped anything else from happening to Ahmed's things. But I wanted more than anything for Brendan the bully to be caught and to prove he was a criminal. So Michael brought in his granddad's magnifying glass and we all searched for clues, but we couldn't find a single one, not even in the school bins. Ahmed was more upset about the great baked beans bag trap than any of the other things that had happened. Even though Miss Hempsey washed his rucksack with lots of washing up liquid, it looked even worse than before and smelled strange too. But Ahmed still brought it to school every day. I wanted to know why he didn't get a new one, or why Miss Hempsey kept saying that it looked fine when it didn't. And then just 2 days after the great baked beans bag trap, I found out. We had all put away our books and we were getting ready for group story time, just like we always did on Fridays, when Mrs. Khan made a surprise announcement. "Now everyone," she said, "this is our last afternoon before we all break up for the half-term holidays, and I thought we could do with a treat. Instead of us all reading a story together, we're going to listen to one instead. And it's a very important story because it's going to be told to us by someone very special in our class." Looking over at Ahmed and Miss Hempsey, she waved them over to where she was standing. I didn't know it just then, but I was about to have nearly all my original 11 questions answered in one go. We all turned around to watch as Miss Hempsey picked up a large pile of papers from the table and followed Ahmed to the front of the class. "I want everyone to listen extra carefully. I don't want anyone asking any questions until after Ahmed has finished telling his story. Is that understood?" "Yes, Mrs. Khan," shouted the class. "Good." And leaning against her desk, Mrs. Khan smiled and said, "Ahmed?" Everyone shuffled in their chairs and sat up straight, waiting for Ahmed to speak. I wondered if he would tell the story in English or in Kurdish, but I was so excited I didn't really care.